Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and joining us now, as he does after every Bills game, is my broadcast partner on the Bills Radio Network, color analyst Eric Wood, also former center and host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. And Eric Wood's appearance is presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup. Big, craveable favorites collide in Chunky Soup's new Mac line, featuring flavors like Buffalo-style chicken mac, chili dog mac, and beefy mac. Stock up for game day now at your local Wegmans. Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal. All right, Eric, so we had heard from fans for the last 3 weeks, this team's got to get off to a faster start. They've got to get off to a faster start. Well, the offense does that to the tune of 3 touchdown drives, stakes themselves to a 10-point lead, but then it goes up in smoke in the second half, and the defense has to close this game out for them. What did you make of the flip in terms of the performance?
Yeah, after the first 3 possessions, they score on all three rushing touchdowns, and you assume this is how the game's going to go. You know, you got a Cleveland team that's eliminated from the playoffs. You got a majority Bills contingent in the stands, and here we go. We're going to run away with it and give Cleveland credit. They stuck around, and their defense stepped up. And whether that was, a lack of execution on our end or them, starting to make some plays defensively, give them credit because – going the final possession of the first half, the Bills get the ball back. They're sitting with a 2nd and 1 and then go all the way back to their own 1-yard line, end up going 3 and out there. They go 3 and out their next possession. They go 3 and out the following possession, but it led to a field goal based upon the interception. And you got a turnover downs, and then you got a 3 and out and another turnover on downs. So Cleveland defense was able to completely shut down this Bills offense, starting with that last drive in the first half. Now, some of it was self-inflicted. You could point back to 4 drops and a misfire, which would make Josh Allen's passing numbers look a whole lot different. You got the Dawson Knox play in the end zone. You got the overthrow to Shakir. Dalton Kincaid's almost catch, maybe was a catch with that front cleat hitting. First play of the second half, they go to a play action. James Cook drops it. And then you have the Brandon Cooks drop down the field. It's a much different day if you don't make those 5-ish mistakes, and I'm not going to call the one on the Kincaid a mistake, but those 5 mishaps lead to a very poor day throwing the football, and it gets you off script when that happens, and it leads to turnover on downs. And so when you look at it, offensively, the game plan seemed to be we're not going to let Myles Garrett get the sack record in this game, and they succeeded in that. Maybe took it a little too far with making sure that they were getting the ball out of Josh's hands quickly, and they threw play action on 48% of their passes. Now, I believe they only had 21 total dropbacks, and part of that's due to Cleveland being able to stay on the field and win the time of possession by over 10 minutes. The Bills only had 50 offensive plays. Generally, you're looking at 65, 70 plays in a football game, and so hot start by this Bills offense. Slower start by the defense, but again, the defense forces 2 turnovers and steps up when we need them to in the second half.
Yeah, and in the second half, the defense did step it up, and really at the end, where the Bills had, the possessions come down at the end of the game, and we talked about this a little earlier, where the Cleveland comes out with a chance to make it again. They just kicked a field goal. The next time they get it back, there's 7 minutes left in the game. They go 4 plays and out. They turn it over on downs. That's the first sack by Rousseau on the 4th down. And then they get the ball back again with 2:47 to go. 4 plays again, minus 11 yards. They got to punt it away, and they never get the football back. The defense really played well in the second half. They did give up 10 points, no question about it. But, man, oh, man, at the end of that game, you really never felt threatened by the way the offense of Cleveland was playing, even though they had a touchdown in the second half.
Yeah, it looked like they adapted to what Cleveland was doing, which is kind of a theme of this Bills defense. Early on in the game, they were attacking us downhill with Judkins, and we did a great job with him before he got injured. He was right around 3 yards a carry when he went out of the game. But a lot of their passing was simply check downs. We were, kind of bailing in our zones, bailing in our coverage, saying, we're not going to get beat over the top. We're not going to give up the big play. You can't put together these long drives. So we allowed a lot of check downs to the tune of Shedeur Sanders starting the game, a perfect 8 for 8. And then they got a couple they ran the reverse. They got an end around. So they were attacking the edges of the defense, making us stay honest with the runs up the middle with Judkins. And, Shedeur Sanders on those play action rollouts got us a couple times. And so to be in the second half, or even kind of towards the end of the first half, the game plan changes at that point, and it becomes, all right, let's not give him these checkdowns. Let's not give him these play action rollouts because he's not beating us down the field. He looks confused when he's staring down the field past these checkdowns. And so it was a great adjustment. Cleveland, some of their biggest plays in the second half and kind of towards the end of the first half were screens that were timely calls based upon our blitzes. But other than that, the defense really came alive. Give Greg Rousseau credit. He rushed the passer extremely well yesterday. Deion Walker using his frame, understanding that Shedeur's not going to sit there with the ball. He's trying to get to these checkdowns, a couple tip passes, and using his length well at the line of scrimmage. And then I thought Matt Milano at the second level and Jordan Poyer at the third level of the defense played extremely well yesterday. Very physical. One of the best plays, kind of a sneaky 4-point play early in the game. Cleveland's got first and goal from the 4, and it's one-on-one in the hole. Judkins versus Jordan Poyer, and he sticks him, which then makes Cleveland feel like we got to throw the football, and they end up settling for a field goal on that possession. Was really pleased and excited about the performance of Milano and Poyer. That's 2 in a row for Milano, where he stepped up in a big way for this defense.
Yeah, and Poyer probably made a touchdown-saving tackle along the Browns sideline later in that game as well. Eric, I'm just going to try to adopt the perspective of a Bills fan here. I think fans were very excited when they saw Joey Bosa get signed, knowing that it should free up Greg Rousseau on the other side in pass rushing situations. I think people envisioned a double-digit sack season potentially for Rousseau, knowing the attention Bosa would get on the other side. That hasn't manifested itself, but the game he played yesterday, I think, was what people thought they would get from him for the balance of the season, and he's been healthy most of the year. Why do you think it took until yesterday to kind of see that from Greg Rousseau with as dominant as he was, not only at the very end of that game? I mean, you look at his stat line at the end of the day, it's 2.5 sacks, it's 7 quarterback hits, it's 9 quarterback pressures. Why did it take until week 16 to see that, pop out of the box?
Yeah, I would say part of it is Bosa, ever since he hurt his wrist, hasn't been as effective rushing the passer. And then, of course, he had the hamstring injury. And then I would say when the interior rushers aren't top-end rushers, you don't have Ed Oliver for, most of this season, even Dwayne Carter, maybe TJ Sanders if he wasn't forced to play on the edge. You just don't – Michael Hoyt going out. You don't have the interior rushers creating push within the pocket, and oftentimes it allows the quarterback, room to step up and step up inside the pocket. We talk about on here all the time. Generally, it takes 2 people to create a sack. Rarely in the league does a guy smoke someone so bad that it's simply him getting the sack. Usually, that's a timely blitz that a quarterback doesn't see, and then most of the time, Rousseau's rushing. To the quarterback's front side. Yesterday, he was rushing a bunch to Shedeur's backside. So you combine all that. Look, Greg Rousseau's got our highest pressure percentage on the team. He's been great against the run. He's heavy-handed. He consistently pushes pockets against mobile quarterbacks. So he's done plenty of good this year. And hopefully with a guy like that who plays hard each and every week, you just hope those numbers come. They did yesterday, and hopefully they continue to come the rest of the year, obviously.
So the national narrative, I think Shedeur Sanders has got to be the most talked about 5th-round draft pick, maybe in league history. What'd you think of him yesterday?
I thought early on he did a good job of taking what the defense gave him, which was, those play-action rollouts and the checkdowns over the middle of the field as we dropped a little deeper in our zones. And I think he does have good mobility in the pocket. He ran for his career high yesterday against us. Generally, you see him use some of his escapability in the pocket to try and create bigger plays down the field. Yesterday, he was looking to take off and run. So, all that considered, I was fairly impressed with the way that he managed the game and kept them in it. Do I if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, am I excited about hitching my wagons to Shador Sanders for the future? I'll say no. I always say in this league, you either have a quarterback that can win you a Super Bowl or you don't. And until you find one, you should be trying to find that guy. And to me, he doesn't seem like it now. Who knows? You give him a full off season of being the guy, all of OTAs, all of training camp. Maybe he can develop, but right now I don't see him as the long-term answer in Cleveland.
You touched on it already, Eric, just a little bit about why perhaps the production on the outside from the receiving core wasn't there. Just 4 targets total, 2 catches for 23 yards between Shavers, Palmer, and Cooks. We see the shuffling of the deck at the receiver position. They now have 7 receivers on the roster, counting Hardman. What do you anticipate the conversations are like this week for the offensive staff as they prepare for an Eagles defense that does have a physical secondary?
Yeah, I think you're looking for someone who can make plays on the outside and who Josh trusts. I mean, he doesn't give his guys many chances down the field. We saw, if you watched Sunday Night Football last night, Drake May gave his guys down the field a few chances that, Josh doesn't necessarily take. Now, some of that's, the way we play offense and understanding that most of the time we can bully ball teams. And, a lot of that comes with 13 personnel or 22 personnel where we might only have 1 receiver on the field at a time. But, to me, it's finding guys that Josh will have confidence that can win down the field and then go make those plays. And I've loved the fact that Brandon Cooks has shown he could separate on some of these deeper play actions. But, you go 0 for 2 in costly moments for this team, 1 on the first possession of the game, first play of the game against the Patriots. And then, you're looking to get back in rhythm yesterday offensively, and you drop that 1 along the sideline. It's tough to give those guys opportunities. And for a quarterback, it's hard to go back to that. And so for me, it's finding those guys. I'm a big fan of Gabe Davis, and I would love to see him back out there. He's a guy that does all the dirty work, but we've also seen him explode in this offense. And I understand it's not necessarily a week-to-week consistently where he's going to grab you over 100 every week. But to me, when you're looking for answers, I've seen him do it, and I've seen him do it in big moments. I would love to see him get a little ramp-up time into the playoffs so you can see what you got in 13.
Speaking of guys who you've seen do it, yesterday was kind of, particularly on the defensive side, was kind of got splashy plays from the old guys, Jordan Poyer, even Greg Rousseau if you're going to go that route. But Tre'Davious, Milano, Poyer, Daquan. So you got, and we laugh when they're going through this, and we're bringing these guys back for the practice squad, and everybody's laughing. It's like, oh, these old guys. Games like this are the reason they bring guys like Jordan Poyer back in the practice squad, Gabe Davis back in the practice squad. All these guys get brought back because they've proven in moments when you really need them, they got something. Is this kind of like cool off the kind of eye rolls when the Bills do bring old guys back, when you get guys like Tre'Davious White and Poyer and all these guys contributing in games you got to have?
Yeah, I think there's a balance. You got guys that you could trust to put it in a pinch. If Taylor Rapp starts this season healthy and plays at the level he played last year, I don't think we see Jordan Poyer nearly as much in action this year. Maybe he's still on the practice squad waiting for his moment, but you have injuries at the safety position. You got a young guy playing next to him in Cole Bishop, and the back end of that defense has played a lot better since Jordan Poyer's back there and you could trust him. And, you got guys like Daquan Jones, who you could trust. You could trust him to play the one technique. Is he a world beater? I critiqued the interior pass rush earlier in the segment. I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but he's a guy that you can consistently rely on in the middle of that defense. And Tre'Davious White has played really good football for this team. And if Hairston doesn't get hurt in training camp, maybe Tre'Davious doesn't play. But you bring it to Tre'Davious White because Max Hairston injures his knee before we even get him pads in training camp, and he's forced into action. And Gabe Davis is waiting in the reserves right now, waiting to kind of get in the rhythm himself. So you got to balance it though, because you play that game of, 1 and 2 year rentals on guys you're comfortable with, you're not developing around them. So I do like the fact that there is a mix, especially on the defensive side of the ball, with the youth movement, with the experience and the guys that they trust.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what Jordan Poyer's status is this week when Sean McDermott addresses the media later this afternoon, because he did leave the game late after that half sack that he shared with Rousseau and did not return. So that'll be an important one to keep an eye on. Eagles coming to town, Eric. They've had their own share of problems, but their ground game has found some traction the last couple of weeks with Saquon Barkley. And knowing that the Bills' run defense, again, tackling was an issue yesterday at times, although the two safeties did a pretty good job to save some touchdowns and keep them off the board with some touchdown-saving tackles. What are you anticipating from the Eagles this week in light of their run game finding some traction again?
Yeah, I think every team's going to test this Bills team on the ground. That's the fact of the matter. When they look at the analytics, when their analytics teams come into the room at the beginning of the week and preach to the coaching staff, here's their tendencies, here's where they rank in certain areas, here's where they struggle with certain formations, you're going to test those. It's a copycat league, and this Eagles team offensive line hasn't been it wasn't what it was last year. Saquon Barkley, tons of lost yardage plays this year. They've tried to run it more under center lately to get them going more downhill, which then takes the read option away from Jalen Hurts back there. But this Eagles offense is going to test. They're going to test the Bills on the ground, and it's going to be a big boy football game. The Eagles have a lot to play for, obviously, as well as the Bills trying to stay alive in the division race. We'll see if they clinch a playoff spot here tonight between the Colts and 49ers. But, the Bills, if someone could fight, there should be a fight for that 5 seed. I don't want to be disrespectful to Pittsburgh. Just looking at, the result of the game already this season when you played Pittsburgh, that would, if we're not going to win the division, you're trying to fight to get that 5 seed. So it's going to be a fun one. The Bills were a couple plays away from playing them in the Super Bowl last year. And, this could have potentially been the rematch.
What difference does it make, if any? And I think it does. But Shaq Thompson went out of the game with the Bills with a neck injury, and their run defense evaporated. And Shaq has made a big difference up front for this team, and now he went down with a neck injury in this Cleveland game. How important is Shaq Thompson to the future success of this club?
Yeah, I think he brings a physicality. He brings an attitude to the defense. Terrell Bernard has his strengths as well, but when you look at the size in this type of play that he brings to the table, and you look at the weaknesses of this defense, you're going to miss a Shaq Thompson if he's not in the lineup. So, I think there's a mix of linebackers that can do a variety of things. Playing in the run game has proven to be a strength of Shaq Thompson. Shoot, I remember playing against him back in 2017. He was one of those guys as an offensive lineman. You take a bad angle where he's got your side and your momentum's not going towards him, you're getting planted. That's not necessarily how our other linebackers play. And like I said, there's effective ways. Shoot, he played next to Luke Kuechly, who wasn't trying to touch an offensive lineman the entire game. That was, if you could get your hands on him, good luck. But he was trying to avoid at all times. And then you got Shaq thumping you from one side and Thomas Davis from the other. Shaq Thompson is still that physical type of ball player.
Eric, thanks as always. We appreciate the time, and we'll catch up with you this weekend.
Yep, sounds good. Merry Christmas, guys, and to everyone listening out there.